Hey everyone, I'm excited to tell you a little bit about fly tying today and show you how to tie a fly. I started tying flies in high school. I had a friend down the street whose mom had a fly shop called Rainey's Flies and Supplies, and she met with a small group of us and showed us how to tie flies, and I really enjoyed it and ended up taking a lot of classes from her, and then I ended up getting a job working for her tying flies. So I'm going to show you my fly tying equipment that I've acquired over the years and tell you a little bit about it, and then show you how to tie a woolly worm, which is a classic. So here we have a collection of fly tying materials. I keep them stored in this handy dandy little storage bin, and I'll tell you about these in a second. I have a bunch of other materials in this shoebox here. So the first thing I want to tell you about is a fly tying vise. That's this thing right here. These range in price from anywhere between about $20. This one was probably about, I don't know, $35, all the way up to many hundreds of dollars. This is a more professional vise that you'll see me using in a little bit. That one probably costs around $150 to $200. So first you need a fly tying vise to hold the hook that you tie the fly on. Hooks come in lots of different shapes and sizes. The size is indicated on the package. The smaller the number, the bigger the hook. So you see a size 6 is a pretty big hook. And they get really small to sizes like 22, 24. That's a really tiny hook. So you need some clippers like this. These are, I think these just come from like a sewing supplier. Thread is a key component, and then there are lots of different kinds of materials. This is called chenille, this black yarny kind of stuff. This is some kind of yarn. This is called hackle. This comes from, believe it or not, the front of a rooster. These are all feathers, and we use these feathers in different ways in tying flies. So I have lots of these hackles, and you get these like shorter, thick feathers, and you get these really long, skinny feathers, and we use them for different purposes. So you'll see in here I have hackle, I have turkey feathers. What else? This is, these are some more feathers. This is the face of a rabbit, and you use little bits of fur, you clip them off, and you use those little bits of fur in tying different flies. The most famous is probably the hare's ear. More feathers, lots of feathers. We use fur from different animals. We use deer hair, and you just clip it off a bunch, a few hairs at a time. We use elk hair. Just lots of different fur that we use in fly tying. We also use a material called dubbing. That's a really fibrous, fine material that we usually wrap around thread, and then we wrap the thread onto the hook. But anyway, those are some of the materials we've got. So now that you know a little bit about some fly tying materials, I'm going to show you how to tie a woolly worm, which looks like this. And I will, for this fly, we're going to use this black chenille. We're going to use a little bit of a weight on a cone head on the front of the hook. We're going to use some number 6 wet hooks, a little bit of red yarn. You can really use any kind of yarn. Some black thread. This is pretty fine thread for fly tying, and our clippers and our vise. I'm going to turn this down like this so you can see this better. So I'm going to use this vise. It's made by Regal. They're a great brand. And I'm going to clamp it onto the table, but I'm going to put a piece of leather around the table's edge so that I don't clamp directly onto the table, because we want to take good care of our furniture. All right, so I'll go ahead and clamp this on here. Okay, so now we've got our vise ready to go. If I squeeze this handle, the vise opens up, where I will place the hook. All right, so here's my hook. It's a number 6 wet hook, and I'll put that in the vise like so. So the first thing we need to do is put on our little weight, and actually we need to put that on before we stick it in the vise. So I'm gonna take out one of these little bead heads. I'm gonna take the hook out of the vise and slip this on to the hook. Put the cone, the narrow part of the cone first. And you don't necessarily have to put this weight on here, but it helps it sink. Some flies we fish with down in the water, and some we fish with the fly resting on the top of the water. This fly is made to sink, so it has that little bit of weight on it. Okay. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is get the thread going, and we hold our thread when we're tying flies. We use a thread holder that looks like this, and you squeeze the thread spool in there, and then you thread the thread through this tube. Okay. All right. So now I've got my thread going through my tube, and we're going to tie on the thread. So the way we do that is cross the thread over the hook and then just start wrapping it away from us. And we wrap it back to the back of the hook, and we clip off the excess. I think this would be easier to see if I was wearing a white shirt. Okay, hopefully this is a little better so you can see the thread a little better. So I've got my thread tied on, and I'm going to tie on the tail end a little bit of this red yarn. So when you tie a fly, you usually work from the back up to the front, or from the tail up to the head. So I'm going to clip a little bit of this red yarn. I'm just gonna take a little bit here. Okay. So I've just got this teeny tiny bit, and what you do to tie something onto a hook is hold it up against the hook. I hold it with my left hand, So then my right hand is free to grab the thread, and you pinch it there against the hook and start wrapping your thread over the material. I'll do that one more time. So you might have noticed as I was pinching it there, I took the thread and I tucked it up into my fingers and pinched it and then dropped it over. That helps secure the thread down against the material. And once you have a few loops over it, you're in pretty good shape. So I'm going to wrap thread back to the back of the hook there, and I'm going to wrap thread over the rest of that material to secure it to the hook, and take my thread back to the tail of the hook. Okay, so we've got our red yarn tied on there. Next we want to start tying on our chenille, and we need one of these feathers from this hackle. So this fly uses a pretty wide hackle. So I'm looking for a pretty wide feather. Let's try this one. I'm going to pull that out of the hackle. Okay. And I'm not going to want the whole feather. I'm just going to want probably about that much of it. So I'm going to clip off some of that, and then I'm going to strip off some of the tines on the feather there. So you can use your thumb and forefinger to try to strip those off, or you can clip them off close to the center vein of the feather. That's going to be easier to tie on to my hook. So I'll go ahead and pinch that against the hook and wrap my thread over it to secure it to the hook. Okay, so now I've got that feather to go, ready to go. And I need a length of this black chenille. I don't know quite how much, so I'm gonna clip off about probably 6 or 7 inches. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. Then I'm going to pinch that against the hook and wrap my thread around it. Okay. Actually, to get a good consistent thickness, why don't we tie that one? I'm going to wrap my thread up to the front of the hook, and I'm going to tie on my chenille up there so that the whole length of the hook has that thickness of that chenille. Okay. Now I'm going to bring my thread back up to the front of the hook because that's where we need it at the end of this process. And using my left hand, I'm going to wrap the chenille around the hook, so in some nice tight coils. So I'm going to wrap away. We always wrap away from ourselves. Wrap away at the top and towards ourselves at the bottom. So away, towards, away, towards, away, towards. And I'm doing pretty tight wraps. And I'm trying to keep a nice, consistent thickness of that chenille on this hook. Okay, so then when we get close to the end, we wrap our thread over that at least a few times. Okay, and then I'm going to do a few more because we don't want that to come out. And okay, and then we'll clip off what we don't need. All right, so I've clipped that off. I'll do a few more wraps in there just to make sure that's secure. The last thing we need to do is wrap our hackle around the fly. And again, we wrap away from us at the top and towards underneath. So away, towards, away, towards, away, towards, away, towards. And do you see how the feather flares out while you wrap it around the hook? And then I'll just do, I think, one more, and that should be good. So then I'm going to do a few thread wraps over the end of that. Whoops, the thread broke. That happens. Not to worry. You can wrap your thread around it again and get right back into business. Clip off your extra thread there. Okay. So I've got a few good wraps around that, the end of that feather, and I'm going to clip that off and do a few more just to make sure it's nice and secure. That's about 10 or 12 of those. Okay. Now, the knot, tying the knot at the end is the trickiest, one of the trickiest skills to work on here. So I will show you how to do that. There are probably better videos out there about how to tie a finishing knot. The way I do it on a wet fly like this is I hold the thread with my left hand, and I take 2 fingers on my right hand and press them against the thread, and then you twist and bring up your index finger. So now you have almost like a number 4. You have a like a right triangle made out of the thread, and you're going to push the intersection right here down to the hook, and you wrap it and then twist it, wrap it, twist it, wrap it, twist it, wrap it, twist it, wrap it. I'd probably do 4 or 5 of those. And then you slowly draw in the loop by pulling on the thread with your left hand. And you want to make sure that remains nice and tight. Okay, so I'm going to do another one of those. And that should be nice and tight. And then clip your thread off. And there's your fly, the woolly worm. So when you fish with this, it'll sink because of the weight, and it acts like a little, either like a little fish or a little bug or a little leech underwater. And hopefully the fish think it looks like a really yummy hamburger or something really appetizing and tasty. There you go.